When a man begins to wake up to life in a deeper way, something shifts quietly inside him. It's not a dramatic explosion. It's not a sudden declaration. It's more like a subtle turning, a gentle opening of the eyes after a long sleep. He begins to notice things he never saw before. He notices the way people talk, the way they chase, the way they cling to things that never last. And once he sees it, he can't unsee it. This is the beginning of the path that sets him apart, the beginning of why a chosen man always ends up walking alone. He doesn't walk away because he hates people. He doesn't pull back out of bitterness or pride. He steps back because the old way of living, the old way of connecting, no longer makes sense to him. Most conversations he hears are about status, gossip, or endless complaints. Once he sees through that, it becomes harder and harder to take part. What once felt normal now feels like noise. What once felt like connection now feels like emptiness, disguised as friendship. He sees how much of life is a performance. The way people smile to be liked. The way they agree just to belong. The way they hold back their real thoughts so they don't lose approval. And quietly, without announcing it, he stops playing that game. He still greets people. He still shows up when needed. But he's no longer willing to pretend. And once pretense ends, distance appears on its own. He didn't cut ties. He didn't burn bridges. He simply stopped pretending. And when that happens, solitude follows naturally. People might still wave, they might still talk to him, but the connection isn't real anymore because it was never real to begin with. He notices how fragile most bonds are, how they depend on shared illusions. People connect through complaining about their jobs, through chasing status, through defending ideas they never questioned. He used to join in. He used to think that was what friendship was. But now it all feels like empty repetition, a script everyone follows to avoid silence. And once he stops needing to perform, he can't join the act anymore. He notices how often people talk just to fill the silence. He sees the constant need for validation, for agreement, for reassurance. And because he no longer seeks those things for himself, he sees how dependent others are on them. He understands why they do it, why they cling to the familiar, why they avoid the discomfort of truth. He doesn't despise them for it. He simply no longer plays along. And that small shift, almost invisible from the outside, creates distance that others can feel, even if they can't explain it. From the outside, he seems the same. He's still polite. He still shows up. He hasn't vanished. But something in him has changed. The people around him sense it. They sense that he is no longer trying to impress anyone, that he's not asking for approval, that he's not competing in the unspoken game of social roles. Some admire it. Some find it unsettling. Because when a man no longer performs, he becomes hard to place. He doesn't flatter. He doesn't compete. He doesn't entertain. And that makes him feel different, even threatening, to those who rely on the game to feel secure. People say he's distant. They say he's quiet. They say he's changed. What they really mean is that he no longer fits into the role they expected him to play. They liked him better when he mirrored their values, when he reflected their illusions back at them. But now he reflects something else. Something grounded. Something not dependent on being liked. And that unsettles them. They see him, but they don't know him anymore. To know him now, they would have to see what he sees, and most people are not ready for that. At first, he believed that staying connected meant staying involved. It meant participating in conversations, showing up to every gathering, maintaining appearances. But as his perspective deepened, he realized that most of those connections were not real at all. They were exchanges of comfort, exchanges of validation, masks meeting masks. And so, without anger, without resentment, he stopped engaging in ways that drained him, not because he cared less, but because he no longer needed others to confirm his place in the world. He still values connection, but not if it requires pretending, not if it demands constant performance. He no longer trades honesty for belonging. To those used to surface-level ties, his presence now feels strange. Some call it cold, some call it pride, but in truth, it is clarity. He no longer speaks just to keep peace. He no longer agrees just to avoid tension. He no longer sees himself through other people's eyes. In that space, something new arises, not loneliness, but freedom, a quiet independence that makes him steady even when others drift away. To most people, solitude looks like lack. Lack of friends, lack of belonging, lack of connection. But to a chosen man, solitude becomes something very different. It becomes strength. He no longer fills his hours with distractions. He no longer surrounds himself with noise to avoid being alone. He no longer runs from silence. He learns to sit in stillness without needing it to end. What others call emptiness, he discovers as peace. What others see as absence, he experiences as presence. For the first time, he meets himself without distortion. In solitude, there is no one to impress, no mask to wear, no image to protect. It is uncomfortable at first, yes, but then it becomes a source of power. He realizes he doesn't need constant reassurance. He doesn't need to be seen to feel real. He doesn't need to be praised to know his own worth. Others may interpret his detachment as arrogance, his silence as judgment, his distance as disinterest. But in reality, he is none of those things. He is simply no longer investing in the endless cycle of managing other people's perceptions. The chosen man sees what most overlook, that much of what we call connection is really performance, a silent agreement to avoid the truth, to flatter, to reassure, to hide doubts, to keep the story going. Once he steps outside that agreement, he disrupts the script without trying. He doesn't provoke. He doesn't argue. He doesn't try to convert anyone. He simply refuses to play. And his refusal is enough to shake the system. The familiar cues vanish. The validation, the flattery, the emotional reinforcement, they're gone. And without them, the dynamic collapses. What used to feel warm now feels strained. What used to be effortless now feels awkward. Not because he turned against anyone, but because he stopped pretending. This is why chosen men walk alone. Because they can no longer pretend to believe in what they don't. Because they can no longer join conversations that mean nothing. Because they can no longer invest energy into illusions they've seen through. He begins to need less, not just materially, but emotionally, socially, even intellectually. He no longer seeks recognition. He no longer waits for approval. He no longer explains himself in order to be understood. And as those needs fall away, so do many of the ties that once depended on them. This is the paradox. The clearer he becomes, the quieter his life becomes. Not because he isolates himself, but because so much of what once filled his days was rooted in searching for affirmation. Without that search, most social activity feels unnecessary. From the outside, this looks like withdrawal. But from the inside, it feels like arrival, a settling into something real. Two-part. As his understanding deepens, the chosen man notices something surprising. He begins to need less not just from the world, but from people. He doesn't crave recognition. He doesn't ask for validation. He doesn't require others to confirm what he already knows deep inside. And when those needs dissolve, many of the relationships that once seemed essential begin to fall away. Not because of conflict, not because of anger, but because they were built on the very needs he no longer carries. This is the strange paradox of awakening. The clearer a man becomes, the quieter his life becomes. His days lose the frantic rush of proving, performing, and keeping up appearances. What once felt urgent no longer matters. What once seemed valuable now feels hollow. He stops trying to explain himself because he sees that most people don't truly listen. He stops trying to be understood because he no longer measures his worth by how many people agree with him. From the outside, this looks like retreat. But on the inside, it feels like freedom. It feels like standing on solid ground after years of drifting. He still values connection, but only when it comes naturally, without demand or performance. He's not cold. He's not shut down. He simply no longer depends on others to complete him. In that detachment, he finds a depth that cannot be created through attachment. Once his eyes are open, he cannot return to blindness. He looks inward and finds silence. He looks outward and sees a world still asleep. He sees the false certainty in people's eyes, the roles they cling to, the beliefs they never question, the endless activity meant to cover an inner emptiness. And he no longer envies what they call connection because he knows the price it demands: conformity, performance, illusion. And yet, a part of him remembers. A part of him still hopes, not for crowds, not for company, but for something rare, for someone who has seen what he has seen, who has felt what he has felt. Someone who doesn't need him to be smaller or quieter or more agreeable in order to feel safe. That kind of meeting cannot be forced. It cannot be manufactured. It arrives, if at all, only by grace. And until it arrives, he prefers the silence of honesty to the noise of pretense. He prefers solitude to shallow company. He would rather walk alone than trade his truth for the comfort of belonging. At first, solitude feels unusual, even heavy. The silence is sharp. The distance is unfamiliar. But with time, something shifts. The solitude no longer feels like emptiness. It becomes normal. It becomes the natural rhythm of his life. He no longer sees distance as a problem to solve. He no longer tries to fill the quiet. He understands that what others call loneliness is often just the discomfort of meeting themselves. He has passed through that discomfort and found peace on the other side. While others surround themselves with constant noise, he learns to live in stillness. While many chase attention, he moves quietly, without asking to be seen. People assume he must be lonely, as if any company is better than none. They confuse his solitude with absence. But he is not absent. He is more present than ever. He has simply stopped performing. He no longer bends himself to fit the roles others expect. He no longer feeds the cycle of reassurance and flattery that keeps illusions alive. He would rather be unseen in truth than visible in pretense. And that decision separates him from the crowd. That is why chosen men always walk alone. The final shift arrives quietly. He no longer needs the world to wake up in order to feel whole. He no longer needs agreement in order to feel clear. He no longer needs validation to know who he island. His peace is no longer borrowed from others. It rises from within, steady and unmoved. He walks alone, yes, but not as an outsider. He walks as a man who has accepted the cost of truth. And that acceptance, though invisible to many, is the mark of one who has truly awakened. Alan Watts once said that waking up feels like being the only sober man at a party. Everyone else is laughing, dancing, and drinking from illusions. And you, standing there with clear eyes, can see what they cannot. You cannot force them to see. You cannot pretend to join them without feeling false. And so, inevitably, you step back. Not because you think you're better, but because you simply can't unsee what you've seen. That is the loneliness of awakening. That is the solitude of the chosen man. He sees clearly, and in a world built on illusions, clarity is the most isolating gift. Yet this solitude is not a curse. It is the soil in which freedom grows. In solitude, the chosen man becomes whole. He learns to trust his own vision, even when no one else shares it. He learns to walk his path without needing companions at every step. He learns that peace is not found in crowds, but in truth. And when he finally embraces that truth fully, solitude stops feeling like separation. It feels like alignment. It feels like walking in rhythm with something deeper than society, deeper than approval, deeper than the endless chase for belonging. It feels like walking with life itself. So yes, a chosen man always walks alone. But he does not walk in despair. He does not walk in bitterness. He walks in freedom. He walks in clarity. He walks in the quiet strength of one who no longer trades truth for comfort. And though the crowd may never understand him, though many may misjudge him, his steps are steady, because he knows what few ever discover, that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of honesty. And in that honesty, he has found something more valuable than acceptance. He has found himself.